Linen or linout. Let's talk facts about the flax. Today we're going to talk about one of the oldest, the strangest, the most misunderstood, and by far the most elegant fibers in the community. We're going to talk about linen. You may think it's a little crunchy, a little wrinkly, a little stringy, but the truth is, in a finished garment, it is serious elevated luxury. And I personally think linen deserves a little bit more respect because this fiber has clothed ancient civilizations, appeared in sacred spaces, survived all the fashion trends, and today it's being chosen for my latest design, the Arlino Top, which means I've given it a lot of careful thought and I'm ready to go deep. Let's start off strong. What is linen? Why does it behave so differently? Why do some knitters swear by it? Why has it mattered spiritually and culturally? And why did I choose it for the Arlino top? If you would like to know this and more, make yourself comfortable, grab your knitting, and let's get nerdy. So, the first question. What actually is linen? Linen is a fiber made from the flax plant. Yes, the same plant associated with those seeds you may be throwing in your breakfast smoothie. But the part used for the fiber is not the seed. It comes from the stem of the plant, which already makes it very different from cotton, which comes from the fluffy fibers around the seed, and different from wool, which comes from an animal. Linen belongs to a group called bast fibers. You could think of flax, hemp, jute, or rami. Even nettle gets involved. Textiles really said, if it grows, we'll experiment. And textile history is full of weird experiments. Some plants became fibers, others became tools. Even teasel, a spiky thistle-like plant, helped to brush wool and fabric. But back to linen. So when you hold linen yarn, you are holding fibers that were grown inside of a plant stem, extracted, processed, spun, and then turned into yarn. That's part of why it behaves so differently. Trust me, I've been learning all about this. Another commonly asked question is linen the same as flax? The short answer, almost. Flax is the plant, and linen is the textile or the fiber made from that plant. So people often use those words casually and interchangeably, and usually that's fine. But technically, you grow flax, you wear or knit linen. Tiny fiber nerd distinction, but we appreciate those around here. How old is linen? Linen is ancient. And I don't mean my favorite pattern from 2018 ancient. I mean genuinely ancient. Humans have been using linen since the beginning of our recorded time. And it's noted to have been especially important in places like ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, as well as across Europe. It's been used for clothing, bedding, sails, ceremonial textiles, household goods, burial clothing, and luxury clothing. What I love about that is when we knit with linen today, we're not participating in a trend. We're participating in one of humanity's oldest textile traditions. And that is kind of beautiful. Which is kind of a good segue into the next very interesting topic. Linen in religion and spirituality. So the next part is a genuine special interest of mine. It's one of the reasons I'm such a linen fangirl. Across thousands of years, linen keeps popping up whenever humanity has tried to make a connection with the sacred. We see it in temples, on priests, around burial sites, seasonal rites, offerings, altars, and at a certain point, I think it's fair to ask, why this fiber? Why does linen keep popping up whenever people are trying to honor something greater than themselves? Let's start in ancient Egypt. Linen held enormous religious significance in ancient Egypt. It was worn in the temples, it was associated with priesthood, and famously used in burials like mummification. But that wasn't just practical. Linen represented purity, sacred preparation, and also the soul's journey after death. It pops up in Judaism as well, in Jewish sacred tradition. Priestly garments included fine linen in their holy service, especially around purification and sacred duties. You may have heard of softness, the prohibition of mixing linen and wool in certain garments. This has been understood through many different lenses. Obedience to divine law, maintaining sacred distinction, symbolic of separation. It's been said that it's too mysterious for human logic. that there have been some esoteric interpretations about the energetic compatibility. This is going to come up again in Wicca and pagan religion, but we'll get there. Whatever interpretation, linen was not spiritually neutral. It definitely mattered. It comes up in Christianity. Linen appears in Christian history and symbolism. It has long been used in altar cloths, sacred vestments, burial imagery, objects set apart for holy use. In many traditions, white linen came to represent purity, devotion, righteousness, and preparation for something sacred. Again and again, linen becomes the fabric of what is consecrated. It then pops up in pagan, Wicca, and earth-based religions. And I don't mean a random aesthetic choice. I mean as a material with symbolic and ritual relevance. Because linen comes from flax, a plant grown from the soil, it's often seen as deeply aligned with earth. So it's often chosen for robes, ritual wear, altar cloths, spell work, seasonal ceremonies, or sacred spaces. In these spaces, there's an understanding that linen, cotton, and wool hold or transmit intentions more clearly, and I think I can understand why. In modern spirituality and metaphysical spaces, linen takes on yet another layer of meaning. You may have heard of claims that linen is a high-frequency fabric, often assigned a value of around 5,000 hertz. Wool is sometimes given the same value. Organic cotton is ranked just a little bit lower. Within these communities, this explains why wearing linen or cotton or wool can feel restorative, grounding, or energetically supportive. Here is where there are other ancient garment laws around mixing linen and wool, saying that combining the two creates an energetic cancellation, a vortex, or a threshold state which is used in these spiritual practices. And this is what I find really fascinating. It's really interesting that across civilizations, religions, traditions, and spiritual communities, linen keeps being treated as something more than cloth. And that makes knitting with it feel even more special to me. Let's get out of the woo-woo world and back to the flax. Why does linen feel stiff at first? Let's address the crunchy elephant in the room. A lot of people buy a linen yarn, touch it, and think, have I accidentally purchased rope? And that's fair. Fresh linen often feels crisp, dry, firm, and maybe papery. That is because flax fibers are naturally smooth and strong, with very little bounce compared to wool. Wool might say, come here, I'll stretch for you. And linen will say, nah. And if you're expecting instant softness, you'll be surprised. There are some hacks to this though. You could pre-wash your skein, for example. That's a little tip I learned working in the yarn world. While I was working at a yarn store, we were taught to suggest to customers to block or wash their linen skeins before they work with them. And that does make sense because linen can arrive feeling quite crisp or crunchy in the skein. Gently soaking it, and even go so far as to massage it a little bit while it's still soaking, can really go quite far. It's going to relax those fibers before you've even casted them on. That could make the fiber feel a little more enjoyable to knit with from the get-go. Kind of think of it as introducing yourself properly before committing to the whole garment. But not every linen needs it. The one that I'm working with from BC Khan the Lino is actually been quite a pleasure to work with. But others could feel particularly crunchy, and then it's worth a try. Why does linen soften over time? Because linen's magic often happens later. After washing it, wearing it, moving in it, and just generally creating a bit of friction. It wants time to relax. I mean, don't we all? The fabric will become smoother, more fluid, and a lot more comfortable against the skin. And this is one of the reasons people become obsessed with linen. I'm definitely one of those people. It ages really beautifully. Some fibers peak on day one. Linen gets better after months, even years, even decades. Another frequently asked question is, where does linen rank in summer fibers? If we ranked all the summer fibers, linen is still top tier. But let's do a quick overview. Please note, these are not my personal preferences. This is just information that I have researched on the internet. Coming in strong, number one is linen. Great for airflow, cool touch feeling, elegance, durability, and drape over time. Second is cotton. Soft immediately, easy to wear, accessible, and quite beginner friendly. Also great for baby. Coming in at third is silk. It's luxurious, breathable, and very temperature regulating. It also has a beautiful drape. Next we have bamboo or viscose. Soft, fluid, cool feeling, and often very drapey. I'm working with a bamboo blend for my sample B of the Arlino Top. Next up is hemp. Strong, breathable, natural, and a little underrated. And at the end of the list we have lightweight merino, excellent temperature regulation and odor resistance. And then right at the bottom of the list is all the blend in order of your general favorite to your least favorite: linen cotton, linen silk, linen wool, and linen viscose. So if someone says iconic summer fiber, linen is always in that conversation. Is linen hard to knit with? Sometimes yes, but not always. I think the general thing with linen is how misunderstood it is, because if you've not yet worked with it, you're going to learn a lot of really important lessons. Linen definitely has a reputation for being a little bit difficult. I think a lot of that has to do with how off the bat it's so stiff, prickly, and a little bit unforgiving. A lot of other people say that the tension is an issue, so if you don't have a very consistent tension, it's very noticeable. And that can be true too. However, I think if you're using a particular kind of a linen, again like the BC Arlino that I'm using, it's actually a little bit easier to maintain your tension, and this linen, because it's a bit softer, is going to be a little bit more understanding. So honestly, I think the more accurate answer really is linen can be hard to knit with, that it's really going to depend on the yarn. Some are very crisp and unforgiving, others are a lot more cooperative. And the third element is going to be you and taking time to swatch it. And I think when you get there and you adjust your expectations, take the time to figure it out, you're going to find that you're going to go back to it again and again. Another frequently asked question is, what needles are best for linen? This is always going to be a personal preference. Wooden needles are going to offer you a bit more grip, which is really helpful if your stitches are inclined to sliding around. Metal needles are going to give you a bit more speed, and they're going to be a little bit smoother. Sharp needles, helpful for splitty yarns. Blunt needles might be helpful if you're inclined to pushing on the needle end in your technique. I do that. It's all going to go back to the swatch. You got to swatch it out and feel it out. And then there's, why do my stitches look so uneven? Linen can actually be a little bit deceptive mid-project. You might look at it and think it looks uneven. You may think it looks really messy and think to yourself, why have I chosen to struggle? But linen is a little bit magical. It transforms as you work it. I've noticed something very interesting. As the fabric grew, it actually got a little bit softer. And my theory is that every time I knit another row, fabric was being handled, somewhat massaged, if you will. It was being warmed and moved by my hands. So it already started to relax even before the blocking process, which means the finished project can actually look and feel completely different from the way it felt when you first started. And then after washing and blocking, it usually changes again. Small note on that, I would recommend multiple blocking phases. I would do a wet block and I would do a massaging during the wet phase and then let it flat dry. And then once it's dry, I would steam block it again just to help loosen those stitches up. Because sometimes linen has a tendency of getting a little bit crispy when it's been wet and dried. Will linen grow after you wash it? Good question. But linen does not stretch like wool. What it does is kind of collapse in on itself and get a little bit longer, if that makes sense. But then it will grow back out again as you wear it. This can usually look like lengthening, like it's dropped slightly and like it's draping more. This is because of its own weight, which is another thing worth mentioning. Linen has a tendency to bias. That means the fabric may lean, twist, or skew slightly, and that is one reason why seam work can be so valuable in linen garments. They're going to add stability and help anchor the shape. You particularly want to look for patterns that have seams across the shoulders. That way you get softness and drape where you want it, with structure where it helps. And this is why fiber choice and construction should always be in the same conversation. Swatching tips for linen. Take it from me, don't do a little tiny square and write it off to sign. For linen, you kind of want to take the time to make a generous swatch, even one in the round if your pattern calls for it. You want to wash it, dry it properly, measure after drying. If it's going to be a garment, hang it briefly so that you can test for the way that it's going to fall into itself. We call that the vertical drop. You want to observe its drape, not just its stitch count, because especially with linen, the behavior of the fiber matters equally to the row gauge. This is where a lot of fit problems begin and end. Luckily, you can put this in your washing machine. I would still recommend though that you do it on delicate or on the wool setting, and try and keep the temperature between 20 and 30 degrees. Alternatively, if you don't want to do that, you could just do a regular wet block, a steam block. I would actually just do as many blocks as possible because, as discussed, linen gets more beautiful and more atmospheric the more you block it and the more you wear it. So blocking can take it from to oh wow. One thing to be aware of with linen, especially rich dyed linen, is that some yarns may release their excess dye in the first wash or two. This doesn't mean it's going to lose color forever. It just usually means that there was a little bit of excess dye left over in that yarn, and you're going to rinse it out a couple of times. I'm talking specifically about dark shades like black, navy, red. I just recommend a little bit of caution. Wash it first and keep it away from lighter items, especially wearing it with lighter items. I have in the past worn a beautiful red knit over a white shirt and dyed it a little bit. Why is linen expensive? Because linen goes through a surprising number of processes before it arrives in a skein. It's not just plant yarn. There are many steps, and each one takes time, it takes labor, skill, and infrastructure. It has to be grown. First, the flax has to be cultivated. That means land, seed, water, climate, farming knowledge, and an entire growing season. Growing fiber flax is not the same priority as growing food flax. Next, it needs to be harvested. And harvesting has to happen at a very specifically right time. Too early or too late can affect the fiber quality. It'll compromise its length and its strength, which is exactly where we need it to be. So timing really matters. After that, it gets retted. Retted is the process of breaking down the natural pectins, which is essentially the glue holding that entire inner part together. This is usually done with water in controlled industrial environments. If you don't ret, the fibers don't actually separate properly. It needs to be separated, broken, scrunched. The woody parts of the fiber need to be removed. And the long, usable fibers are separated from the rough internal structure. Historically, this was hard manual labor. Next, we're going to comb it, and from this point onwards, it starts to look a lot like animal fibers. The fibers are going to need to be aligned, cleaned, and refined. And this is going to create a smoother, more consistent fiber, which is now going to be ready for spinning. Think of it kind of like brushing tangles out before styling your hair. Spinning. This is when they get twisted into yarn. Different spinning methods create different textures, softness levels, strengths, and overall finishes. This is one of the reasons why not all linen yarns feel the same. After that, it's ready to be dyed, transported, and eventually sold to you or me. So if it costs a little bit more, what you're paying for is the fact that there are no shortcuts to making this fiber. It's been through many hands and many stages before it got to us. And that's another reason why it's so lovely. So why do people fall in love with linen? People haven't just liked linen for a few trend cycles. Humanity has an ageless relationship with linen. We're talking civilizations have risen and fallen with linen in their homes, their temples, and in their daily lives. That alone tells us something. It's not a fad fiber. It's one of the oldest companions we've ever worn. And why do we still fall in love with it? I think a part of that answer is because linen offers a different type of beauty, not an instant synthetic perfection kind of beauty. It's not overly polished on day one. It's something far more human. A fabric that can begin crisp and wrinkled and transform into something that's alive. It gradually changes with use. It remembers your wear and softens exactly where it needs to. It drapes according to the way you've actually lived in it. And it develops a lot of character. It doesn't want to be pristine. It wants to be lived in. And then there's the deepest layer. Across history, people have repeatedly chosen linen. whenever they've wanted to honor something sacred, with death, ritual, celebration, devotion, seasonal change, again, and again. This fiber is clearly something that truly matters. And whether the reason is physical, spiritual, or symbolic, people keep recognizing it. It may ask a little more from you than easier fibers do. It might require your patience and your understanding, but it offers you something back in return: durability and longevity. A fabric you can count on for decades, a lifetime even. A fabric that can be passed down to your children and your grandchildren. And that is beautiful. Actually, that's romantic. If you are following me on my socials, specifically over on Instagram, where I am the noisiest, you may have heard me say that I was going to do my Arlino reveal today. And I was going to, but I hit some speed blocks. Kind of like everything we've been talking about here. I've been learning about linen and I've been learning some hard lessons. So I've had to frog out my entire top and start again. So unfortunately, my big reveal is being delayed. But you can keep up to date with the process over on Instagram if you're interested, Arlino. And over on Instagram, you can find my website, arlino.com, where I will be running my cashmere outside tee at 50% off for the next week, as a big thank you to all of you for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hit subscribe if you're into nerdumentary. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Until next time.